Hi.
Hi.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us on our first panel discussion with Children of Scientology and the Lighthouse Project. And today we're joined by Christy Gordon, Victoria, Miriam, and myself. And we're going to be discussing a subject of betrayal blindness. So to really get into the concept of what we want to discuss today, we're going to read a short statement. Betrayal blindness is an insidious plague that continues to perpetuate the suffering of children within Scientology. And it is high time we address it with the urgency it demands. For far too long, America has blindly embraced an indicted convicted felon and bestowed upon him a status he does not deserve. This man normalized the systemic institutionalized abuse of innocent children, all meticulously documented within the horrifying confines of Scientology's hotels. We must ask ourselves, in what twisted world could children possibly be helped by subjecting them to unthinkable levels of torture and cruelty? It is a question that demands an immediate and unequivocal answer from the United States government, and we cannot afford to wait any longer. The half-baked narratives driven by betrayal blindness have been used to justify the abominable actions of a man, L. Ron Hubbard, who turned the lives of countless children into a nightmarish circus of torment. His creation of fanciful costumes and grandiose fantasies served only to mask the stark reality that these individuals were nothing more than manipulative charlatans who betrayed the trust of innocent kids. We refuse to carry the burden of this stupidity any longer. In the year 2023, it is incumbent upon us to raise the shadows of ignorance and complacency and confront the grim truth that betrayal blindness has enabled far too much pain and suffering within Scientology. It is time for accountability, it is time for justice, and it is time to put an end to the horrors inflicted upon the vulnerable children. So,
Yeah.
First of all, I didn't say Surge. Can you say that to Congress, please?
Yeah,
Like,
seriously.
we need to get you in front of Congress. Like,
well, you know,
immediately.
we're taking the baby steps, you guys, because
Yeah.
that is what it's going to take for us to really help all those kids out of those hotels. And we realize that we have this opportunity to be advocates. And, you know, that's why it's so important that, you know, we're so happy to see Miriam and Victoria and Christy joining this live conversation so that you guys can also ask your questions. And, you know, we're here in search of real answers and in search of real transparency. And that's why we're making ourselves available to answer all of y'all's questions about our childhoods and what they did to us, because we keep getting ignored and our voices have been trivialized for the past 7+ decades of this scourge of this indicted felon that was allowed to poison all of our parents and all the people that were taking care of us to become completely blind. So, I mean, I would like to hear from, you know, from you, Christy, or Victoria and Miriam, in
Well,
what...
it's just,
Go ahead.
I was just going to jump in there and say thank you so much, Serge. So Serge put together this beautiful episode for us on a very important topic, betrayal blindness. And what we wanted to say is that we're sort of finding our way here as survivors, and we're hoping to build a community of survivors who can come together and share and discuss and listen and ask questions and learn things together. And so in that way, we might be a bit messy, we're figuring things out, but I just wanted to, we just wanted to let you know that some of the topics we discuss may be distressing for listeners or viewers. So please, if you need to, please do take a break. And and
you can always rewatch later if you have the capacity to as well.
Yeah. And we always encourage everyone to get support and to reach out to a trauma-informed organization in your area if anything does arise that you want to address or you have questions and you want to speak to somebody who has more knowledge about it. So just wanted to cover that off at the outset. Now, betrayal blindness is a really important topic to Scientology, particularly, I feel like there's two different things. There's the first generation experience of how they get entrenched in the relationship of Scientology. It's a very intimate relationship. And so if you can think of it like that, an intimate partner relationship almost, where over time, they have begun to sacrifice more and more, and they become more and more entrenched in it, and it becomes more difficult to leave, and all those sorts of things. And they've given up resources and relationships along the way, very much like a narcissistic relationship, intimate partner relationship, intimate partner violence relationship. The second generation experience, the children of those parents, is different because at the outset, we don't have those resources. We don't have those relationships. There's nothing really to take away from us. It's the stark reality of the situation that we are born into, by no choice of our own, by no fault of our own. And that's the place that we find ourselves in. However, we still, naturally as humans, we attach to, or we try to attach to our parents for our own survival. And in a group like this, we also have, we are dependent on the group for our own survival as well, because often we're put into group care rather than our parents caring for us. So betrayal blindness, what's really important about that to understand is that when a person is reliant on a group or a person for their own survival, they then have to, when they are betrayed or crimes are committed against them or they are slighted against, they have to sort of justify that away. And the term is called like this whooshing effect that happens, where it just gets whooshed away. And the person has to do that because they have to try and survive. And this will also happen in a trauma incident as well, trying to survive trauma incidents, especially when you're a child, because let's say, especially if the person is a caregiver. And so that's where betrayal blindness really comes into play, because it's really built upon the survival part of it. So that's important to understand at the outset.
I feel I feel that dissociation also plays a major role in what we're talking about here in betrayal blindness,
100%.
both for trauma survivors. There's the dissociative aspects, but something specific to Scientology. There's this unique dissociation because we are taught that we are kind of detached from our parents. Like our mothers were physical vessels in which we were birthed, but there is no real parental dynamic, not outside of Scientology, not like it is outside of Scientology, where there's maternal instinct and your parents and you're connected by this like spiritual loving thing. It's very different within Scientology. So there's like a unique dissociative aspect, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
Yes. Parent hat,
I agree.
child hat. It's just a role you're playing. It's a hat.
It's
you
very
put on or
clinical.
take off, right? It's not a heart connection necessarily, or for the most part, it's admiration. I admire
Or
you
affinity.
for being a big Thetan, for being upstat. Like the reasons that you are admired or respected by your parent are for your accomplishments. Typically Scientology judged accomplishments. So
Or
you
your
need to just get closer to your mic so that
totally.
Oh yeah, that's better.
or your level of exchange
Mm-hmm.
as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I would say that, sorry, Giga.
Well, shout out to you guys that are mothers that have lived to tell, because if you head over to, Victoria's Instagram, for example, you see so many beautiful examples of that generational trauma being broken because we are no longer blind. We had to reconcile the receipts, the very incongruent receipts that were our childhood, where nothing made sense, nothing added up. In the aftermath of what took place, we were left there to reconcile receipts that are completely irreconcilable.
Yeah.
So now that we know that, to see you guys really start a new life and, not repeat the mistakes that were perpetrated on you. So I think that's super valuable, and it really talks to the resilience of humanity, and that we can get better. Yes, trauma really screws you up, but also there's people that have to do the heavy lifting, the type of heavy lifting you guys have done, because I know you've done so much of your own heavy lifting to to be here advocating for other kids that are stuck in those hotels. So
That's a really good point that you raised there, Serge. And it has to do with the rewiring of the brain, and we can all do that. So I was listening to a podcast with Stephen Hassan recently. Actually, he did an interview with Catherine Spallino, who wrote The Bad Cadet, a second generation Scientologist who grew up in the cadet org. And one of the things that he said is on that very point, because she has children of her own, and she's found that really healing and rewarding for herself. To give that nurturing that she never gave. And he was saying that's really important because the brain has this elasticity, and it's important to understand that you can rewire those things in your brain to reconnect those things and to reinstall the things that you needed. So that's a really good message for anybody out there who because it is hard. It's hard, I understand. But just to understand that there are things that we can do to, and, even just parenting aside, we can recreate our own childhoods in a way to give ourselves something back. And I think that really comes from doing things that are like really pleasurable, that are just for you, or exploring things that you really like hobbies, things that you do that are just for your own pure enjoyment. I think that can really be helpful too. So there's a lot that you can give back to that inner child, and it's really helpful.
Miriam, to that point of the elasticity of our brains, that was one of the first things I learned right after I left Scientology. I got myself into therapy, which was very difficult, by the way, a very hard transition. But one of the first things I learned from a therapist was that we can create these new pathways in our brains. And it can be something as simple as just rewording the way that we speak to ourselves. I'm not a good artist. I can't draw. Just taking a moment and saying, you know what? I am a good artist. I can draw. You're literally creating new pathways in your brain. And the more that you build that muscle, the more pathways you can recreate. And I thought that was really interesting.
That is interesting.
That's really, really good. I'm wondering, sorry, because I was just going to say, I'm wondering if maybe a person could write down some of the things that they kind of repeat in their head that are quite negative, and maybe then on the other side of the piece of paper, write down the reverse of that, or write down what they would like to say to themselves. Or, I think that could be really helpful.
Like affirmations or something.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know. I was going to say that I feel like along with this betrayal blindness is this forgetting, this whooshing away because you're trying to survive this situation and you can't survive it the way that it actually is, the way that it's actually happening. And so then you disregard your instincts, your internal compass. And I think we can really relate so much to that. And it reminds me of something that Miriam talks a lot about, which is this brain-body connection and really being in touch with how you feel about something, trusting your instinct about something, not undermining that. And Scientology just erodes that and just destroys it. And so
that
it
is
takes
so
a really
hard.
long time to get back in touch with yourself, if you ever were in touch with yourself, which I think if you're born in or in at such a young age, you may never I don't know. I've this whole thing about, do you have an identity to go back to? If you were informed in this situation, in this environment and culture where they told you what your identity was, just tricky. But with the parenting, or even just changing your mind or changing your behaviors, maybe you can, and then it's only in a crisis that you kind of fall back to this base thing that you were taught as a child, or at least I find that. So when I'm in a crisis, I fall back to these old behaviors, or I respond in these ways. But for the most part, I have absolutely been able to completely change the way that I look at things, the way that I say things, and the way that I feel them. And it's so
That's a big
powerful.
deal.
It's so
Yeah.
powerful, but takes time and effort. I think it either a lot of time or a good bit of effort,
Both.
or both.
But
I just did
and it's
time.
yeah, no, but that's such a good point, Christy. And it's like a muscle, and you're just flexing it. And what I would say is you can take that in little tiny steps and really celebrate each one. Like, let's say the first time that let's say you come across a situation, and maybe normally you'd be hesitant, but this one time you definitely put your foot down and you said, absolutely no. Or like, no, I am going to take a day off. I'm not going to just like, just keep pushing, or I am going to take time off when I'm sick, or whatever it is. This maybe they seem like small things, but it's a changing of pattern. And so then really celebrate each time you say no, each time you say, no, I'm just going to look after myself today.
Holding boundaries for yourself.
Yeah. Or like, or even like, no, that doesn't work for me. Can we reschedule? Actually, like things like that, they seem small, but if, if you didn't have those kind of boundaries in place, and it's something that you need to work on, and also becoming really familiar with how things feel when you don't like something, or like, yeah, that's a really good thing to practice too. Because one thing that would happen to me is that I wouldn't realize, like I would just keep pushing through because it wouldn't like indicate to me, like my body wouldn't go, oh, this is wrong, or whatever, or like you need a break, you need to slow down, or don't overcommit yourself. I'll just be like, I can do all the things. Right. So it's like I had to become more or not even like but like I have to do all the things, you know what I mean? Just have a constant pressure on myself, and say yes to most things and overcommit and stuff. So it's just like a slowing down, like, okay, but realistically, what can you do, and how does that feel? How are you going to feel if this, you know what I mean? And just really getting in tune with the body feels. I was going to say as well, Christy, is getting back to betrayal blindness, as you mentioned, and that wishing away and the justifying, it reminded me of Jane Doe 3's victim impact statement, where she talks about she had to see it not as it was. And she says that a few times in her statement. And that really sort of hung around me a bit, really soaked into me, because I understand that. And that is exactly what we're talking about. She had to see it not as it was. And and it's scary. Something happened to her that was really scary. And she was put pressure upon to stay in that environment. And she had to, because in order to continue to survive, she had to reframe that. And we see that in sexual assault victims and rape victims and across the spectrum of trauma victims, for sure, especially when you're still connected to that person, and in some ways you're dependent on them for your care or your survival, especially.
Yeah. Well, children's trust in Scientology, I mean, they're born in Scientology and they're trusting the organization and all of its members implicitly. I mean, children trust is implicit, and all the moms out there know that that's part of survival, right? But it's like we were born in this fake family of people that were mainly just randoms. They didn't really have any reason to really look after us or care, because we were also just random kids. So that's where it really goes also awry for the kids, because they're just being looked after randoms. And the real families all get any safety nets are completely shredded, because what safety net, like when one kid is in one part of the building and their parent is so far away, how are they supposed to fend for themselves?
Right. And so what would happen is, this is internally sort of in the C organization, the care of the children and what that setup was like. We had a small handful of caregivers and then a large amount of kids. And so obviously that ratio was constantly just completely off. But what would happen is when a child would come forward and say, I don't like this, something's happening to me, or I don't want to be here. In some cases, they didn't want to be there because they were being sexually abused. In some cases, they didn't want to be there because they simply wanted to spend time with their parents, or they weren't being treated well, or they were being bullied. So there's a number of reasons why the child wouldn't want to be there. But what we see time and time again is that when they did come forward to an adult, because that was their person that they had to communicate with, they didn't have a direct communication line with their parents. Their parents were always working, and they would have to just wait until the parent visited. But if the child was saying, I don't want to be here, then what the adult would do would be to look for the child's misunderstood words first. And if that didn't clear it up, would be to find the kid's missed withholds. That means that they've done something, the child has done something wrong that they're withholding that they don't want known. So those were the two steps that were done.
Talk about this. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you in your thought.
No, that's, yeah, you jump in, yeah.
It's just, you are setting people up for failure from the get-go. Where I know we're talking about like how, as survivors of Scientology specifically, we have had a hard time recognizing our own intuition. But like from the very beginning, as a child, you are taught that if you don't like something or something's being done to you, it's your fault. That's your inner voice for the rest of your life. It's just, I mean, I know we've talked about this ad nauseum, but every time that Miriam, like you say something like that, I'm like, oh my God, the realization hits me all over again. Like kids, specifically in the Sea Org, really did not stand a chance at that time, to develop any sort of identity or intuition.
Yeah, Victoria, it breaks my heart. And like, I was a child and I experienced that. But sometimes when you look at it in a broader view and you're thinking of other children coming forward and the same thing, because you also think that it's just you. There must be something wrong with me, right? I don't get it. There's something I'm not understanding. That other people can follow the rules and, but I can't. And I'm always getting in ethics trouble. That was my whole childhood. I was constantly getting into ethics trouble. Yeah. So, which meant that I was like, in their eyes, I was constantly doing things that were not right. I just wasn't aligning with what their goals were, or, like I wanted to read books in my room. I didn't want to go to do Scientology studies or whatever it was. So, and so that's exactly right. Like, so where is the advocacy? So unfortunately, that's so devastating. Every time that a child came forward, they were told that there was something wrong with them. And they're little kids and they don't have anything else to grab onto, and all the information that's being put in front of them, everything that they're reading that Hubbard says, is saying that there is something wrong with them, in fact. So,
I mean, any form of dissent is met with punishment. Any form of dissent, anything that you want to dissent about, like this doesn't feel right, this is not right. And that just like literally furthers the betrayal blindness, right? Because it's like, you never have a shred of agency, and kids need to have agency. Like, it's unacceptable that a child is being told from the very get-go that their agency is nothing, because just as you guys said, it's like they're depending on your cues in order to understand themselves. And
that's such a good point.
That is a great point. I want to write that down. They're depending on your cues for their own agency. They have no agency for themselves. They're waiting to see what the adults will say and whether or not they have permission to be themselves, or
and what to be. And I mean, for us, I remember as a kid being so, impressed by these ridiculous clown uniforms, right? Like they had all these stars and all these bars and all these chains, and everybody acted like everything was so legit. And
I was starstruck by the adults around me.
Constantly, So it's all this constant culture of like celebrity worshiping, and there's nothing to worship or even admire. I mean, now in the aftermath of it, it's like that's where the naivete was literally torn apart. I mean, what you just said, Victoria.
Yeah.
starstruck. Like kids are running starstruck of these people because they really do purport that they got it going on. And, all of these fake levels that they achieved that meant nothing. It's like,
Yeah.
like I think Liz Gale just pointed out, Sanko's fallacy.
Mm-hmm.
The more
Yeah.
the adults invest in this BS, the less they can see, because it's not in their best interest to admit any of their mistakes. But then again, who is getting that bill? Someone's paying that bill, and it was us.
Yep.
Can I read an example of what Miriam was just talking about?
Sure.
Someone in our group, second gen group, shared this Apollo Training Academy student progress report the other day, and it was just, at the time, I would have looked at this and gone, whatever. And now I'm reading it as an adult that's been away from this ridiculous culture and just tragic environment for children. And basically,
Christy, can I just explain, just to give the background of that
Totally,
type of
please do.
report? So often throughout the growing up as a kid, and as your kid, everyone, it wasn't always, but every once in a while, like I think sometimes when the parents were kind of kicking up a stink and saying, hey, we don't know what's going on with our kids, they would reinstall this. Is this a weekly report? Does it say weekly at all? Or just say
dates from this date to this date, and it basically was a 2-week period that they're covering.
So they would so they would reinstall like a regular reporting system, which what it was is that the child would write, because I have an example of this from the ranch too, from another kid, very similar, but basically it was a way of relaying communication from the child via the adult to the parent, so the parent understood what they were progressing along, what were they actually doing, what were they studying, what were they involved in, what was happening with their child. And so maybe
don't talk to your own child,
right?
Don't ask them. Oh my God.
Well, they're too busy working. They just need this all condensed into a report. So what this report was is that the child would fill out this form. And then it would go via the adult to the parent, as I said. But it was like the form would be specific. So it might say, in this case, it's asking about the studying, like what are you learning, what courses. But in other forms I've seen where it'll say like, what's your post? Like I remember filling this out when I was at the ranch too. And it was always like, you'd be like, I had fun, or like, and sometimes you'd write a little message at the bottom, like, love you, mom, and whatever. So yeah.
That's the one I've seen for the ranch that you're talking about, was from this child talking to his dad going, I love you.
Oh God.
I did this week and I love you. It was just the sweetest thing. And you knew that this is probably the only communication that happened between this child and their parent, which was super sweet, that he still was attached at the heart to the parent that he didn't actually grow up with, Anyway, so this one is Apollo Training Academy, and it's a student progress report. And it says, dear parents, you will be receiving this form regularly. Its purpose is to increase the communication and reality between you and our school, as well as a more accurate report of your child's progress. We look forward to your comments or suggestions. Thank you. Signed, this teacher. And then they're noting basically the achievements of this child. Course completed, none. Courses in progress. Animal classes in cursive. Lates, 3. No-shows, 2. Number of days absent, 4. Personal grooming uniform, fine. Ethics.
So that was what that was. Sorry, just to back up there. That line on it was like, how is their personal grooming / uniform? As in, how is their appearance? Their appearance is fine, but sometimes it would be like they have holes in their pants, or they haven't had any socks for a week, or whatever.
When we're done with this, I'd like to talk about what's missing from this. So okay.
So this is sorry, I don't want to harp on this, but this is what it's sad, because personal grooming, this is the child taking care of themselves. You have to understand, there's no parent there like making sure that they have clothing and that they're clean, that they've showered and all that. So this is the child getting themselves ready, and oh yes, they are presentable. Tick. Okay.
Well, I would like to add to that that when you're just a Scientology kid that's not in the Sea Org and your mom is off at the org all day long because she joined staff, she's on foundation and she's on course the rest of the time, you're doing the same thing, grooming yourself, getting yourself to school, doing your homework by yourself, and you don't have anyone doing these. Your school will send a report card saying, doesn't play well with others or whatever, doesn't interact well. Anyway, so ethics. Nancy worked with him some, but his ethics scene really does need to be handled. She had a very rough time getting him to communicate. Teacher comments. I think you should pull the string on him, not wanting to be here. It may.
Sorry, can I just. Sorry, I'm so sorry.
Yes,
I'll interrupt here, and then if you could read it again, just so everyone gets it clear. But pulling the string on someone means to find out they're over. It's like pull, pull, pull. Oh, Serge will know this the best because he would do this. But if you pull the string, so you need to get to the bottom of something, basically. Yeah. Sorry, I interrupted and I apologize. But if you could read that part
pulling
again.
The string is not a pleasant experience for a child. Pull the string. I mean, it does mean someone's digging into you to find out why you're doing something, and it's typically not a thoughtful, loving pull the string. It could just be ask questions, but typically it's interrogate the child and find out why they're doing this thing. So Nancy worked with him some, but his ethics scenes really needs to be handled. He has a very rough time getting him to communicate, and I just think a child that's not communicative. Now I would go, what's happening? Let me look for some other red flags. And this child's absent, missing school, and also not able to communicate.
And also this should indicate to the parent that they need to intervene here. Have some time with your child, okay.
Well, and we're going to get into this as we start digging into cadet stuff, but the policies that talk about restricting the parent from intervening in their child's behavior.
Yes.
Because it's a bypass, because they are not actually senior to their child. The child belongs to the organization now. So we'll go there. But yes, a parent should be going, red flag, red flag. Anyway, it may not be a misunderstood phenomena that he is dramatizing. His out of calm, nattery behavior indicates miswithholds. As long as they are there, word clearing won't be possible. That is that.
So they're saying, yes. So they said nattering and out of calm. So out of calm means that, and also this was mentioned earlier in that note, but out of calm means that you're out of communication. That means that you're not freely communicating. So this child is kind of being a bit quiet, and he's not freely saying what's wrong. And also they're talking about an ethics scene. So the child is displaying out ethics behavior is what they would call it, which means that he's not aligning with what they're saying that he has to do. And he's also saying, I don't know if this is in that part that you already read or if this is later, but he also says that he doesn't want to be there. So this kid is not communicating. He is displaying, maybe disruptive behavior. He doesn't want to be there. I mean, all these, it just screams for intervention from the parent.
Can I interject with just I don't have experience within the Sea Org, but just as a general public Scientologist kid, I'm just thinking about betrayal blindness, and looking now in hindsight of how I wish that I was treated as a child. Hearing you, Christy, read that out loud reminds me a lot of me as a teenager. And, I had failing grades. I was not very communicative. I had lots of red flags like self-harming, drinking, you name it, whatever childhood survivors go through. I had all of the hallmark signs. And it's why didn't the adults step in and intervene? Why was it my fault? And I had miswithholds. It was my fault that I was self-harming, or I had insomnia, or all of a sudden I wouldn't talk for months at a time. It was because of my misunderstood words or my withholds. It's just, just a lot to process through, I think. But I think that ties in with betrayal blindness, because I really did think at the time, maybe it is just me. Maybe I'm a bad kid. Maybe I'm doing something wrong. Maybe it is miswithholds that I don't even know I have.
But Victoria, this reminds me of like prior to that. In fact, what had happened is you'd experienced sexual abuse and rape as a child, and that you had gone to authorities. It was reported on within your school because they were obviously concerned enough. And then that police report was filed, and it didn't go anywhere. The police, because your auditor and your brother, who was your caregiver at the time, then spoke to the police, and it just went away. And you were quite shocked. You described in one of our episodes, you were like, I thought I was going to be going to foster care. I was like, okay, I got to pack my bags. Like, it's all happening. I'm getting out of this very dangerous, harmful situation that I'm in. But in fact, that didn't happen. And you were dependent upon, you know, this care for your own survival. They didn't remove you from that harm. And so I think, I don't want to speak for you, but if I understand. Yeah. So you're dependent on that for your survival, but then you also are so angry. So that's me. I'm going to talk about my own experience. I became so angry about my situation because on the one side I was completely helpless, but on the other side, like, I was angry about it. Yeah. And so what do? You can tend to internalize and go to those, you know, harmful sort of avenues, because where do you release that? Like, how do you cope with that?
Especially
where the
if
very system
we were never
cannot
given
protect you.
Right. We were never given coping tools. I learned as a child that anger and sadness were low tone, and that had no place in your day to day. So if you're angry, you're low tone. I wasn't given tools to cope with valid anger that I had, or grief.
Get your TRs in, or write up your Ws. Like, those were those literally, like, I don't know what else were we getting calm. Yeah. Get back in calm, handle your ARC break. Yeah. So that just means talk to the person more. And if this is an abuser, you're just supposed to communicate through that abuse with them as a child. And then get your TRs in means confront better and don't react to things. Don't
no human emotion and reaction.
Right. And then write up your overts and withholds means get off your own crimes. So, like, those were our tools. That was your tool, Victoria. Why didn't that work?
Yeah, I know, right? It's weird.
Yeah. And how amazing. Wow. Like, just, oh God, I'm getting emotional.
Do it.
Like, Victoria, understanding some of what you went through, and I only understand it through our conversations that we've had throughout this series. And, you know, you've been able to find your way. Like, and I know that's not been easy. It's been tough, right? I understand that. And for me as well, like, that's been my experience. And each of us have had to find our way because it was important enough, because maybe at some stage, we got angry enough for ourselves and we just went, no, this isn't right. And now I need to figure out how to actually deal with this shit. And that takes a lot of work, and it's a lot of years, and it's a long journey, and I'm still doing that journey. But, like, how amazing is it that we can be in this place where we are now and be able to have these conversations, and that we've been able to learn so much. And I think that's important for us. Like, sometimes it's really great to just take a moment and just, like, look at where we are and really celebrate that, you know, and look back when you can look back and see where you've come from. And
come a long way. And that we're so emotionally capable too. I think that's such a big deal, that not only are we healing, but we're able to put this in words. And what I've witnessed with, you know, talking to you, Christy, and Miriam, and other survivors through this process, specifically with the podcast that we've been doing, how emotionally mature we are, and compassionate, even though we've been hurt time and time again since children, but we can still hold compassion and space for the people that hurt us. Whether or not they deserve it, probably not, but we can still hold that compassion and understanding. And that speaks volumes to our resiliency as well.
Well, and the role of betrayal in Scientology, I mean, the role of betrayal is what they're basing their survival on, right? Like Scientology cannot be alive if they lose loyalty.
Right.
If they're not able to silence their members, then their whole sham crumbles, because the only reason that it's working internal is because of that betrayal of everybody betraying themselves, betraying their own best interest ad nauseum. Because, I mean, that's the sickening thing about this convicted felon, L. Ron Hubbard. He was turning people against themselves and then against their children. So it's completely unthinkable that this betrayal blindness has not been literally called out with a horn, you know, because the sheer phrase alone, betrayal blindness, you know, we might not be doctors or therapists ourselves, but I think we have a serious case of serious betrayal blindness from every end user, right? Because they were doing a technology. This is technology. This is not theology. This is not...
It's rigid, systemic technology that's written right into the code.
Technology. So we would love to hear how in the year 2023, technology that puts every end user who's going to be data mined ad nauseum, which is how they also achieve that betrayal blindness. Because for us, it was like these gaslighting sessions from hell.
Yeah.
Like, it's unthinkable what they did to us in those rooms. Really, really is unthinkable that they recorded it, that they watched it, that they video recorded without a shred of humanity. Meanwhile, they're like dehumanizing every last kid that they are taking it up on themselves to grab and to use as guinea pigs for this sick experiment, and to apply technology that couldn't be more useless.
Yeah. I've got a good example with betrayal blindness. So I remember, Catherine Spolino, who again, she wrote The Bad Cadet. And we grew up together, and we're, you know, we've known each other throughout our entire lives. And I think this is 2009 when I went to LA for a visit, and we'd gone out for the night, did karaoke, and we're drinking and stuff like that. I had a really fun night. We get back to her place, and then we're just chatting and stuff. And then she pulls out her laptop, and she was like, "Oh, have you looked at this?" And she starts showing me stuff about L. Ron Hubbard. And at this stage, I was still a Scientologist. I wasn't actively doing anything, as in I wasn't on a particular service at that time. And I was just starting to kind of be in that stage where I was like, something's not, I'm just going to pause this. Like, I'm not sure about this. And so despite all the abuses that I had experienced, I was still a Scientologist. That's what I knew to be true, quote unquote, or like, I thought that my eternal spiritual freedom depended upon Scientology, and that was the only way, and all that sort of thing. So Catherine starts showing me like this website and all this, you know, truth about L. Ron Hubbard and these photos of him and all the lies that he'd spun. But you have to understand, I was raised on the L. Ron Hubbard life exhibition. Basically, we were toured through there like hundreds of times throughout my entire childhood. The L. Ron Hubbard life exhibition, you know, paints this prolific and brilliant life that L. Ron Hubbard apparently had. So I really believed it to be true because they had all the artifacts, they had all his awards, they had all the things. And my mother had painted all these paintings of him that are on display there. But there's like, you know, there's videos that you watch, this whole tour that you go through, and it's very immersive, very visual. In fact, even when you go into the Dianetics, there's a theater room and there's the smoke billows out of the volcano and it's this cool air rushing up your legs. It's a everything is so like, all your senses are kind of soaking everything up.
1,000,000% indoctrination field trips for children, like propaganda
100%.
indoctrination field trips for children.
It absolutely was. And so, and I was toured through there, as kids, we'd pile onto a bus and, sometimes once a week. So suddenly she's showing all of these things like, oh no, all of that's a lie. And I was like, okay, I just kind of didn't get enough time to kind of even process it. But then after I came back to Australia, not long after that, we're, talking about it again. I think maybe she sends me some links or something like that because I'm looking at it again. And I'm kind of like, oh, I'll look at anything, but I won't look at the OT3 materials. If it's OT3 materials, I'm going to shut it down. But I'm kind of interested in looking at this. And then I looked at it for a little bit, but then I was like, okay, I got to close that off because I started to think about like, what does that mean for me then? What does that mean about my parents? Like my mother who sacrificed everything for this, even her own children. Like, what does that mean for her life? That her time in Scientology has been a lie. Like it became, when those sort of things started popping up, I was like, okay, this is too much for me to understand right now. So I closed that off and I just put it aside for a while. Yeah.
I still feel like I'm having those realizations and still working through it. I mean, I've been out for a while now and I'm still through talking to all of you. I'm like, oh my God, it's so many layers. It's peeling the onion forever, I feel.
Well, because we're on a recovery, right? We literally were made to be addicted to this rhetoric because we couldn't live without the rhetoric. We couldn't think without it. I mean, as you're saying, the withholds, the misunderstoods, we kept going back in our own heads for those solutions that we were being sold as that's the way we needed to think. And it couldn't be making us more blind the more we did what we were told to do. And like you guys said, every time we did it and it failed, oh, it must be not working on me. Because again, the culture internal, especially the adults that really got off on these big success stories that made us feel, I mean, I remember being like, God, I never feel anything like this. And just seeing all these people going on and on and on. And so amazing, so great, so grandiose. And, it's just clownery. It's just sick clownery because, again, like, in what world are you having all those wins by being served by slave kids?
Yeah.
And I don't want to go off on a rant on parents. Not that we can't do that, but I was just reading a second gen who wrote a statement and it was so powerful. And he was just basically saying, adults lied through their teeth to us, to our faces, and children believe adults. They don't know any better. They lied and said we would gain, and they had gained superpowers. And this would all make sense, and it was all so important.
Literally.
And they knew it wasn't. They knew they didn't have those superpowers, what he's talking about, these bizarro success stories reinforced. Yes, the room is clearer now, like the emperor has no clothes, and I have to find a way to say that I got some benefit from this thing, because if not, I'm no case gain, or I'm not as good as this guy that achieved these success stories. So it's this bullshit lie competition. It's like a lie competition. And kids don't know any better. And who were our heroes? Our parents, L. Ron Hubbard, these jackass celebrities. Like, we didn't have any other.
I agree. Yeah.
And part of the superiority complex that was developed in all of us, because as much as we were being abused and whatever, we still thought that technologically we were better humans than others.
Yeah.
Like, and that's how we
at least we had Scientology. I might feel like shit, but at least I know the truth. And, I have a
Those
one
are
up on
those
you
are
for next
talking
lifetime.
points. Those are literally talking points. At
Yeah.
least you have Scientology.
At
At
least,
least you're
yeah.
not as degraded as that guy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I mean, it's all part of,
Yeah.
reconciling the truth is what gets rid of the blindness, is what will give you that 2020 vision right back.
And
Because-
talking to others, being in community and comparing notes.
Absolutely. And that's what's so important that we do this for the kids that are Googling stuff and being like, are my
Yeah.
parents really smart? I mean, imagine if we would have been able to have other people that were in our position that, oh, they went through this as kids. Oh, they're speaking my language. Oh, they're bringing up all the things that I was running into that
Yeah.
that didn't make any sense for us, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I would say something that's really helpful is to try and, if you can, just gently separate fact from feeling. So, like when you look back at the situation and you can have certain feelings about it, and fear could be number one because you don't even want to look at it because of the fear. So, if you can sort of ease through that and just try and look at the facts, even maybe write them down, and then it can help to kind of just pinpoint what's exactly happened. I remember when some of my initial conversations, like as I made friends outside of Scientology and in conversation, let's say I might mention something and they would just have like this shock, horror look expression on their face. But to me, it was normal.
Mm-hmm.
Like I was like, oh, I don't feel that. They displaying like this reaction to it, like, oh my God. And I'm like, but that was normal for me. And I don't even feel that same feeling.
Yeah.
So
I relate
but
to
then
that
when
so
you,
much.
right, yeah. And so then when you like look at it and you're like, oh, I would go like through, and I knew that it was wrong at the time. But when you're not allowed to have a reaction to it, you're not allowed to say, hey, this is wrong, or do anything about it, that again, and that gets squashed, then it's like a developmental thing over time. It's going to wear this away and wear it down, and have that effect. And that's, directly, betrayal blindness. But
Yeah.
So then, yeah, to come to where you are and kind of look back and then identify those things, it's easier to look at it in terms of facts rather than your feelings about it. Because, for example, you can really love your mother or love your father, but if they did terrible things to you that hurt you, then those are two separate things.
And as far as
Or they can be, you can have both. You can have
At the
both
same
at the
time,
same
that
time.
can both be true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's also okay. Yeah.
And as far as breaking the cycle of betrayal blindness, it is challenging to break that, but it is essential to break that cycle for the sake of those children. And part of getting rid of that cycle is increasing public perception as to what is going on. It requires a shift in the public perception. As much as everybody goes, but they're a church and America's so free and everyone can do whatever in the hell. Like that public perception that that Scientology has poured millions of dollars into, right? Because it's like the only reason that narrative has stuck is because they poured in all those million.
Yeah.
They got their deal with the IRS, the crooked people at the IRS that could have literally not been sanctioning all of this if they weren't literally sanctioning it. And as we're now finally having these free voices on YouTube of all places, I mean, we never thought.
And TikTok, yeah.
And TikTok,
Yeah.
and it's like, and it's only because we've been driven here. I mean, we've done other types of advocacy, but we realized that unless we're coming with receipts, unless we're coming with corroboration to the public at large, there is no other way these kids have an advocate. And us showing up and being able to make points that no one else can make on our behalf because they didn't take it up on themselves to go inside that hotel. And that's why we are outraged with this corporate media. I was just hearing this girl, Rachel, on Mike and Leah's podcast, like, Osa uses Google Glasses. How in the literal hell is only reckless Ben used Google glasses to get inside one of those places to see for themselves
I
what?
didn't hear that.
Yeah. Osa's been using Google glasses. They went with Google glasses to the opening of Going Clear so that they could really get the whole movie and
Oh,
write down
wow.
what they were saying.
Oh, wow.
I mean, they couldn't be more pathetic and criminal if they
Yeah.
weren't organized crime that runs circle around cartels and mafia of the worst kind. Because again, it's like, who does this to kids at scale? Who?
Yeah.
Who? Like even the mafia, like it's all between
Yeah.
adults for the most part. I mean, yeah,
Yeah.
child trafficking can take places in a lot of ways, but
I'm pretty sure the mafia recognized children are children. In
Yeah.
fact, they
I was gonna
really
say.
protect children. They respect childhood. So we have someone worse than the mafia here
Yeah.
in
literally
regard to
what the
children. Like, I don't
L1
know.
Hubbard's mafia needs to be disbanded and all the betrayal blindness needs to be confronted. I mean, it's almost, guys, like we need to use the same words they were using on us. Y'all get your
You do.
in.
Yeah.
Get it in. Like
Yeah.
they're out AF. Y'all couldn't be more mutual out rudes. Y'all can be more in agreement about ridiculous things because you're all in on it.
Yeah.
Right. So like that's also L. Hubbard explained this, right? He called it mutual out rudes because you've committed the crime and you saw someone commit the crime, then you went blind to the crime. So all of this stuff is already kind of like in their vocabulary, but it never mind that it's inverted. So they still cannot see out of it.
I
Yeah.
feel like
Well,
I'm
I'll tell
constantly
you who
saying,
has.
what? I'm
Yeah,
constantly
I'll
saying
tell
it's
you who
backwards
has.
day.
It
They're
is
doing the
backwards
things they're
day.
accusing
Yeah.
others of, and they're teaching us to do things the opposite of how we should be doing them. Like it really is backwards. What are you going to say?
So I'm going to assign out rudiments to. I would declare that yes, local law enforcement and major Scientology organizations have got a mutual out rudiments, and so that means that there's a mutual sort of agreement or thing that's happened that then is now affecting how they go about doing things. So this was really evident in the recent video was with Claire Headley, Mike Rinder, and Leah Remney, where they talked about Claire and Leah had gone to LAPD and met with Chief Moore, and it was actually turned into a bit of a ridiculous scenario. Leah was shocked when Chief Moore started spouting things that were like she knew that came directly from Scientology. And what Mike Rinder was saying is like, yes, but this is a result of 30 to 40 years of the work that Scientology has put into this relationship. And I know that. I was aware of that when I was there growing up as a kid. And this has been going on for years. And this relationship, now again, not everybody, we're not saying everybody in LAPD is in error here, but this relationship does tend to take precedent. The Scientology, just the power of Scientology, and the protection that they have as a religion, and they can't be questioned, they can't be criticized, which is crazy. But then that they put in all this safe pointing work that creates this really unsafe condition for victims. Because how does a victim come forward? And in fact, we have come forward and our cases sit there and they go nowhere. And it's crazy because what happens is somebody, and here's another thing as well, while I'm going on a rampage. So this is the thing that is so infuriating to me. And I know I don't have the power to change this, but when a victim goes in and reports something, they are asked, like, do you have any is there anyone that can give statements that can support what your claims are? And you go, oh yeah, I told so-and-so and this person knew, and I told this one in this year, and when I was this old, and yet you go to those people and say, hey, would you be willing to provide a police statement? The answer is no, they're not willing to, because they're Scientologists, and Scientologists don't do that. Yeah. So you have suddenly anyone who could be a witness in your case is not viable because they're not willing. Everything's voluntary. And in fact, when they do get to eventually ask your perpetrator, like, oh, so here's the allegations that this person is saying that you did. You have a right now to voluntarily, if you wish to, make a statement. So it's all voluntary. It's
Yeah.
voluntary for everyone except for the victim, because the victim never had a fucking choice.
Yeah.
Anyways, this pisses me off. But what I'm saying is that this huge burden on the victim to try and bring a case forward, and they have to do it to these law enforcement agencies that are all wrapped up and enmeshed with Scientology, and that's very difficult for a victim to try. It's almost insurmountable. Like, the Scientology force is so huge in, like, how do you get anywhere with a case that you want to bring forward?
Yeah.
It's utterly insurmountable.
In other situations, so 4 of us have all filed police reports, right? There's been police reports filed on the harms done to us, which is, you can't say that about everybody. Like, we can probably count us on 2 hands, maybe.
And the problem with the police, going back to them, is leadership. The leadership is compromised. The leadership are the ones that are getting the perks. The leadership are the ones that are getting the 20K. The leadership are the ones that are getting the special, oh, Tom Cruise is really going to see you. Oh, we're really going to hook you up with this special thing over here. There's all manner of things that are going to leadership. And then, very similar to Scientology, they're just stuck in this pyramid where the people at the top are the ones that control all the levers at the bottom. And that's why we are now calling out all of these commissioners, corrupt AF commissioners that are literally, don't care if their human trafficking division is talking to Marisol Nichols at a podcast about human trafficking. I mean, as if that's just not an insult to our intelligence. Like, a woman that pays for kids to be trafficked inside of those hotels gets a podcast with the human trafficking lieutenant of the LAPD. And that's why the LAPD could not be more in hot water right now, at least with all the kids, of all of us that have filed reports there, that they just play dumb with. I mean, there's no investigation. There's no pulling the string. We would know. We know what in the hell it means to pull a string. But apparently the LAPD has not even a shred of critical thinking skills to be like, oh yeah, this doesn't make sense. Let me really pull this string, because there's no incentive for them to pull it, because we've all been trivialized. Like, everything that happened to us, well, you were having a religious experience. What in the hell are you complaining about? What religious experience was I having? Never mind that they could not even defend the so-called religious experience we were having, because they don't know what an auditing session is. And they purport that, as long as we don't know what it is, because we really cannot critique it, because it's really separation of church and state, and all that is going on is separation of child trafficking hotels being state sanctioned to function, trafficking all of us. And it doesn't matter if your parents said it was okay. It does not matter whatsoever. It's completely irrelevant. Human traffickers a lot of times are their own parents. The parents do it.
I'm just, Christy, before you go, speaking of just parents, I have to do my parent thing. I don't want to leave early, but I have a bedtime I have to get to with my kids. So
do it. Most important thing in the world.
I'm going to leave early, but thank you all for this conversation. It's really important. And I hope, Serge, that we can do this again and have more conversations about this.
Let's do it next week on Wednesday.
Let's do it. I'll see you there, because these are so important.
Yeah.
But thanks everyone who's watching, and thank you for the conversation.
Bye, Victoria.
Thank you so much, Victoria.
Thank you.
I was going to say, someone's over here in the comments saying Thorn, and I was going to say, shout out to Thorn, right? That would be
shout out to Thorn, that we're waiting to hear from their leadership. I mean, we've been tagging you guys, and you know what? We're not going to stop tagging you. Y'all went to Congress. Y'all got millions and millions of dollars to really help trafficking victims, where, you haven't helped a shred of Scientology child that was trafficked. So your technology could not be more pathetic. Your technology could not be more useless and compromised. If Ashton Kutcher wasn't best friends with a kid that grew up in Scientology, is now facing prison for life for what he did. So let's.
Speaking of which, I saw Aaron Smith 11. He's been pulling the string on Thorn, And he said, so this was in the fundraising live for the Aftermath Foundation. So he mentioned that Thorn, and I think this was in a particular year, and I think it was, he either said 18 million or 19 million. I forget the exact figure, but it was one of those. Right. So that was what they took in for donations, and what they paid out for their staff was 14 million, which is so crazy.
It was crazy.
So
And I think
who benefits?
Aftermath,
Right.
who takes no salaries whatsoever. So I think that was a fabulous comparison of Aftermath.
Yeah, and the question is with these things is like, who actually benefits? Like, you can go and sit up there and you can say, oh, okay, yeah, when law enforcement came to Ashton Kutcher because they couldn't find a predator, like, that's great. And he's like, and they asked me, an actor, and whatever. Like, I get what he was saying was like, yeah, I'm just an actor, but, in fact, I'm doing really important things. Like, I'm not just an actor. I get it. Whatever. So, but you can throw those things out, and I'm glad that you've done some work that's really good. But if we look at that, just that fact alone, that 14 million out of 18 or 19 million went to staff and expenses and didn't go towards, like, that just doesn't add up. That just doesn't add up. Like, what are you doing? And who is really benefiting here? And how many more people could you help if that ratio was, a lot different? Because, yeah.
Someone in the comments says 15 million of 18.
Okay.
Went to management, so 3 million was left over. Thank you, Cornelius Antonia. Mm-hmm. And I will say our experience had belief betrayal, parental betrayal, probably a million other betrayals I'm not thinking of. And then when you get out and try to report it, you've got the authorities betraying you as well because of this safe pointing that Miriam was describing, where they have literally, like, their tactics are to fair game people and harass them into doing what they want, or to love bomb them and pay them off and partner and ally with them. And those are the two. They just switch back and forth. Which one works? Is it a positive reinforcement or negative reinforcement? And that's what they've done with law enforcement. And it really does. Unfortunately, it's effective. It's disgusting to think about the fact that our authorities are that gullible that they would fall for this love bombing and safe pointing and checks on stage and donations and community service of the human trafficked people being made to do community service with these organizations in order to get credit. It's so gross. So it really does add to this betrayal.
Well, we have three cults running. We have the cult of Hollywood, we have the cult of Scientology, and then we have the cult of police. They're all one of the same. They're all run as pyramid schemes with very people at the top of leadership making all manner of very questionable, shady AF things. And then, yes, everyone underneath that pyramid gets literally shat on because of what those people are doing at the top. Even if you take on Scientology, again, nobody in Scientology, and we're not saying, guys, that everybody in Scientology wanted there to be like, where do I sign up to abuse kids? I really want to abuse them. It's not done with that intention. Never mind that that's what they're doing and they're full knowing. So it's like, it's hard to reconcile those two things. Like, oh, they really want to help, but never mind that the help was just sheer, utter, dehumanizing torture, unthinkable, indefensible. Under no manner of way could you explain or pitch that in this year 2023 to us, the kids that did have to experience that for not just one time, not just 15 minutes, not 2 hours, not 3, not 4, literally hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours these people spent locking us up in rooms to have their way with us. And the police that, it's called playing dumb. They play dumb. They play, oh yeah, we don't know. Oh, we're just so gullible. Oh yeah, we have to be so in the middle of everything. Like, so-called like, no judgment on, for whatever. But it's like, no, all of this was documented. All the video recordings are there. If we're lying, come, put us in jail for lying then. You know what I mean? It's like, let's just do it that way. Hey, if we're just making it all up because we really want to call attention to ourselves, fine, bring it on. Put us in jail. Put us in jail. Put us on the stand, make us talk, and then just send us to jail for being perjurers and liars if there's no cassettes of what they were doing to us, if there's no worksheets of what they did to us, if there was no coordinated, full knowing effort, like what happened on the case of Miriam, where everybody knew inside of those damn hotels what happened to her as a child. And it wasn't just one person. It wasn't just someone in a closet that found out. Literally a whole network, a wide-ranging network inside that disgusting place. Which again is like, how horrible for you, Miriam, to literally have not a shred of dignity. Like, not only was this felony committed against you, then you reported it, then everybody played dumb, then they all told each other that it happened, and then they came up with like ridiculous so-called handlings that couldn't be more egregiously disgusting as handling. Oh yeah, we'll just write it down on a piece of paper, to your perpetrator. Just as long as you write it down, everything is going to go away. So we're really questioning all of that BS, because again, with what face is this law enforcement pretending this is not exactly textbook trafficking of minors at scale, since that's what's written in their laws, no less. I mean, if they really want to talk about the law, they can go read their own human trafficking laws, the black and white laws that exist, where coercion and fraud are literally the pillars of trafficking and human trafficking. So if they can make the case to us that we weren't coerced and that we weren't defrauded and that we couldn't have been more of a consenting age in the United States to sign binding contracts, then we can have a conversation. But since they cannot have that conversation because they know that they're just, pathetic child enabler and abusers. Like, none of this abuse could happen at the scale that it happens, you guys, with us three, somebody from Australia, Miriam, somebody where Christy is, in Northern California, and me in another place. Like, why are we even having this conversation right now? Oh yeah, because we really want
because we need to.
and make it a lap and literally waste our time making up stories about. So that's why, we're kind of just fed up with all.
Yeah, because it is crazy. Like, so this religious protection, it is like sanctioned abuse. It's sanctioned abuse of children, where children do not have, so not only do adults not have the regular human rights that would be, that a person would understand to have, but the children never gain that sense that they do have those rights in the first place. So, and not only that, but there are crimes that then go, that there's no justice that they have. There's no real justice, that they have their own internal justice system. And it's this bubble, this protective bubble that they're in, and everyone's playing make-believe. And it makes you feel like you're going crazy because you grew up in this system that you were helpless to do anything about the situation that you were in. And so when you eventually leave that system, you think, okay, I'm safe now. Now I can do something about it. And you take those necessary steps to do something about it. And you're still up against the same problem. And that same problem is the religious protection of Scientology. And that everything is, everything's so...
You had us at make-believe, Miriam. You literally had us at make-believe, which is, couldn't be more infantile. It couldn't be more egregiously disgusting that, law enforcement is now outsourcing enforcement of laws to pathetic clowns that take a 2-week course inside a hotel, and all of a sudden they are there dishing out all manner of disgusting legal advice that couldn't be more grounded in complete make-believe if they weren't just all infantile, pathetic clowns inside. And we're calling out all of the adults. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. You were there. You were 21 and over. You put on the clown uniform. You really thought yourself
Yes.
important. You really did the 2-week course. You place kids to do the ethics handlings. It's like, it's all full knowing. That's part of what law enforcement looks to see if something is actually a crime and criminal. It's like, did you know you were committing a crime? And they know it because they hide. They have meetings about how they're going to hide things. I mean, it's not like they didn't have so many meetings about how they were going to hide things about what happened with you, Miriam. How are we going to make sure that this doesn't really get out? Never
Oh,
mind
100%.
that they're very comfortable that the LAPD is not going to do anything, because the LAPD is like, yeah, y'all have your own laws in there, right? We don't have to do anything. Like, why would we want to do any heavy lifting when you can just do it yourselves?
Well, they understood how difficult it is once you move somebody out of the jurisdiction, and that's one of the issues that I'm still coming up against. And so they knew that, and this was, you know, they funded this. They had to pay for the flights for my father. They had to pay for my flight to move us both out of the country. Do you know what I mean? So this is Scientology funded protection of a predator and further victimization of the victim. And
Well,
it's just, yeah.
Tax-free dollars funding separating predators from their victims, getting them as far away from Scientology as
Yeah. So we're
getting them
opening this
right,
lens.
exactly. So getting them away from Scientology, yeah,
We're
and then
opening this
moving
lens.
them and then moving them back, yeah.
We're opening this lens because we need to understand who is in charge of oversight of the LAPD commissioner and friends, his little bodies underneath him. They need to get investigated. Are they running a racketeering enterprise themselves? Are they corruptly using their position of power to help themselves? Because you know what? We're sick of the LAPD pretending that they are dumb and that we pay them to be dumb and dumber, because as if it wasn't just even enough that we all got abused and whatever. It's like, oh yeah, now that we're in California, let's pay them ourselves. Like, we subsidize the police. Like, in what world were we abused, trafficked, taken out of school, brought into a country that it wasn't even ours? What in the hell were we doing even here in the first place? You know, not living any American dream, as if, you know, and that's kind of how they pitched it to us, right? Because it was sort of like, oh, aren't you so lucky to be in America? It's like, no, you could have just left us alone. You could have left our parents alone. And then, you know, whatever happened in our lives, then it would have been that, you know, but instead we have this. Instead, we have all of this dysfunction that, you know, we've had to carry all that burden for ourselves. And then anytime we've tried to go to the police and do the right thing, they play dumb full time, no matter how many of us kids that went and now told them what they were doing. So this idea that they cannot investigate anything, they cannot just grab a piece of paper in the folders. I mean, now when Hubbard left all of his co-conspirators implicated AF, you've never seen a criminal organization organizing the receipts of how implicated they are and how full knowing and how premeditated everything is. I mean, if you were just to grab Miriam's PC file, it would be the date she reported it, what she said, what questions were asked of her, as if she had to be deposed. These people depose the victim and the perpetrator in different rooms, and if the perpetrator says something that the victim didn't say, then they go and, you know, speak to each other. I mean, it's just so grotesque, you know. And
yeah, and you made mention of infantilization, and like, so where is there another scenario where this is like state sanctioned, government sanctioned, like full scale, broad scale kink fetish, you know, situation that's just allowed to just run rampant, where everyone can dress up in costumes and just like, and do this crazy shit, this crazy psychological shit to children, where perpetrators can roam free, and that the perpetrators in a lot of cases can be the ones that are celebrated, and that the people that they commit those crimes against, they're the ones that get punished. Like, in what world, you said, Christy, this backwards. It's like completely backwards. Everything's like upside down. It's like the upside down world. You go to the upside down.
Adulticizing children, infantilizing adults, celebrating predators, protecting them, enabling them, punishing victims. Like, it's a lot. And I think in my childhood, when you feel overwhelmed, you kind of just like check out because it's too much. It's too much to, and then you leave and you try and report it or do something about it, and it's too much because no one cares or doesn't listen, or your statute's expired, or you don't have any evidence because your perpetrator has all the evidence and they're not going to share it, or your mother won't write a victim. I mean, this is so much stuff, but we were talking today about SPTV and people under the radar and kids like saying, I got away. I just want to live my life. I just want to now have a chance to be a human being after all of this abuse and slave labor and whatever. Yes, that is true. However, here we are. We have a chance to do something about it. We have a chance to use our voices to make a difference. And if the authorities aren't doing it, then we have to keep applying pressure. And so it does matter what we do. And yes, I know it seems like a further investment of your life, of your time. And that's a hard decision to make. And I'm so thrilled that so many of us are making it anyway, even though we could just slide off into the sunset and try and put it behind us and forget about it and give up and feel hopeless about it or overwhelmed by it. But no,
we're not going to take it anymore. That's literally the message in 2023. We are not going to take it anymore. We're done taking it. We're done carrying everyone's water. We're down thinking that, are they so naive and gullible? Well, you know what? Sharpen your critical thinking skills. Listen to our YouTubes so you get asked the tough questions that we are allowed to ask. Given that there are still kids going through what we went through. It's that simple. It's not complicated. It's literally that simple. What you did to us is still happening. Then answer the questions today. Since we did have a front row seat that we didn't ask to have, none of us asked, none of us wanted to be there, none of us could have consented anyways. Even if we really wanted to be this, we didn't even have the ability to be there. But, because what you just said, Miriam, is all this kink fetish, dress up, make believe. You're really an ethics this, you're really a commander of that. You really no. It's actually complete degenerates that are being literally capitulated to, cradled and canoodled by the top brass of the LAPD. And this disgusting stuff is happening in Australia. And as you know, Miriam, I have a particular pet peeve with Australia because they're the first country who literally went on the record to let these people be a religion. And that set a precedent for other countries to play dumb. And it's like, well, if they really did find a way to do it there, that's what Scientology was counting on. And that's the only reason that anything went anyways. And the fact is, Australia has a huge advanced organization. They have a huge recruitment of Asian people that they come and enslave into the country. And all these countries that were literally founded with slaves are still at it today, enslaving people, you guys. That's really the bottom line. It's like Congress can literally shred its constitution that is just a bunch of platitudes that nobody gives a shred of an F about, because any old attorney that goes to any old ridiculous university that gets a certificate can shred every law, because all they do is write some BS legal schmiegel. It's all it is. La 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 la, li 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 li, and 503 and blah blah blah. And Monique Yingling could not be more pathetically a disgusting, pathological liar from hell. That's who Monique Yingling is, you guys. She might be part of a big DC law firm that blah, 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 that the States Bar Association of Washington, D.C. doesn't give a shred of an F to have any quality control, any guardrails on these legal Frankensteins that are allowed to just run rampant because they're getting paid the big bucks. Apparently, If you can come up with a lot of money for retainers, that is all it takes to literally circumvent all the very toothless laws that no one is around to enforce. Law enforcement, give us a literal break. What in the hell law are you enforcing? Which law did you enforce? Please advise immediately, all of you law enforcement people across the world. Like, it's as if this is scourge of L. Ron Hubbard is not literally impregnated every last disgusting country that has bought the false disgusting pitch.
Yeah, I would say
absolutely.
our blindfolds are off. They were on for a long time. Our gags are off. I was reading this explanation of betrayal blindness the other day, and it was something like you were pushed off a plane and you're free falling, and you turn around and you look back up, and it's your partner, your parent, your church that pushed you off. And that feeling, that feeling of betrayal as you're falling and you're going to hit the ground and die or whatever. And that really resonated because that felt visceral to me. It was like, yeah, that is what happened. Truly.
Wait, should we go to some
This
questions?
is,
Yeah.
yeah, I was just, sorry, one
Let Vera.
last thing on there. I think this was a theme that really came through in the Danny Masterson trial, where we learned a lot more about through the expert testimony, the expert witness testimony that was given by Dr. Ziv, where it's more often as a perpetrator is going to be somebody that's known to the victim. And that's something that a lot of people are still, understanding. But she provided a lot of information about that. And because, it is more often going to be your spouse or a close friend or a neighbor or a teacher, or it's going to be somebody that's in your life, rather than that scenario of a stranger down a dark alleyway. And betrayal blindness is there's a huge part that the betrayal aspect for sure comes into play. And then the reframing of the victims. Anyways, there's a lot of information in her testimony about that. If anybody wants to look back at that, that's really interesting. Yeah.
I like that too. And what interesting to me is that Danny Masterson was the, defendant in that case. And yet, for most of the victims, although he was the predator, the main betrayal to them was Scientology.
I agree with that.
Because they didn't know Danny. They didn't have a relationship or a friendship apart from, Chrissy Bixler. The rest were just acquaintances. Like, they didn't have
within that faith, social group.
Right. Their faith was not in him. Their faith was in Scientology. So the huge, incredible betrayal was actually their own church, Scientology, their pretend church. And anyways, I just think about that.
And a very visible case of that is Jane Doe 1's mother. And you can see that through her letter. And also just the fact that she still, even though she wrote that letter, I do encourage people to read it if you are up for that. It is quite, what's the word? It's very, there's some, it can be alarming, some of the stuff that's in there.
It's alarming, but it's a great bird's eye view of a Scientology parent's point of view.
Completely.
Of Scientology, justice, and their child. I love that she was trying to defend her child, because many of us, our parents never did that. They never did that. They would not put themselves between us and Scientology justice. Like, that's too dangerous for them.
And her mother's, so Jane Doe 1's mother's letter really depicts this, trying to achieve a sense of justice within Scientology, and that was failing. And it was actually, in fact, there was more damage occurring. So the Scientology official that was involved was actually inflicting more damage upon the victim, her daughter. And she was quite outraged by it. Now, what's important to understand as well is that she then did not take the stand in this trial, because she could only go so far. She was only willing to go so far. She said, I'll stand up for the harm that you experience, but I won't stand up against Scientology with regards to that harm. because again, and that's betrayal blindness, right? She's still not making that
follow
leap.
Scientology's policy. So she
Right.
followed the ethics and justice policy. She wrote the letter as she's allowed to. And then when it comes to,
Right.
oh, will I file civil suit?
But you're not allowed
will
to.
I write a affidavit for you? No, that's because that's against policy. So she was so boxed in by policy.
Yeah, completely.
Yeah. This has been
Let's
great,
go
you
to
guys.
some questions.
Yeah. So we didn't really hit this, but one solutions for betrayal blindness was we did cover this, but it's like seek professional help.
Yeah.
Seek professional help. There's so many, Miriam has stressed this in our podcast so many times, that these support hotlines and stuff are so readily available these days and really helpful. And they didn't exist before. And so I hope that people will try them. They're confidential. They're peer support. They're people that understand the survivor victim role and what you've experienced, and betrayal blindness, I'm sure. And then 2 was self-compassion. We talked about that. Treating yourself, taking a break, setting a boundary, saying no to some things, understanding your limitations and what's healthy for you and what's not healthy for you. And that's so hard for us, right? That was a huge lesson.
And celebrating all your wins along the way too. All of your, if you were able to, you were working on flexing this particular muscle and you got, to a point where it was easier for you to do this, or to say no, or to set a boundary, or to put a structure in place for yourself that worked better for you. Celebrate all those little things. They're actually not little, they are huge, and they have a huge impact on your life. And celebrate all those good things. And having compassion for yourself, I think, is also investing your time into things that you really enjoy, things that fill your soul. I love going to the beach in any weather, any occasion, and I'll walk away from there and I feel really, really good. So it just really fills my bucket back up. So anything that you have like that's like that, maybe you like to go to a Sunday market and to take the time to pick out your fruit and veg and to get your, your special coffee or whatever it is. It's whatever, those treats are really nice, and they're good for you, and you should absolutely do all those things. Yeah.
Even for Scientology kids, it's actually rewarding yourself, even if your stats are down, or not just basing your achievements on a statistic or a production, and being a dilettante sometimes when you need to. Like, these are things that Scientology kids are taught are stigma, and you can't go to the beach and just sit still. You can't celebrate a small achievement. You need a big achievement. It has to exceed the prior achievement or something. So yeah, relearning how to
rewiring. Yep. Yeah. So relearning, rewiring, holding compassion for yourself, and also with that as well, maybe paying attention to some of the negative things that you play in your head, and also like how would you like to reframe those things? How would you like to be spoken to? Think about it as like how you would speak to a friend. Sometimes we speak to ourselves differently than what we would say to a friend. So be kind. Yeah.
It's true. I think we're raised to be incredibly critical, right, of ourselves. And our hardest, our largest critic is ourselves. We strive 100%. For perfection so much, and that's what we were groomed to do. And so it's really tricky and so powerful to step away from that negative self-talk. It really does help to be able to practice self-love and forgiveness. And it's good to be able to do it to other people and for your friends, but really it's harder but really beneficial to start with self, I think. And that's probably hard for everybody. It's super hard for me. I don't know. Yeah. The other one is journaling and art therapy. Liz Ferris was saying the other day, I was talking to her about like, what did you need when you first left? What did you need 5 years later? What did you need 5 years later? What do you need now? And she kept saying, a journal, a better journal, another journal. And it was just the sweetest thing ever. Just like get your thoughts out of your head, down on paper. So if you're not in therapy or even between therapy, it's really good to get those things, because those things matter. They mean something. You're they affect you, and maybe sometimes writing them down or sharing them with others can make all the difference, you know?
So I have this weird thing, and I'm going to share it just in case anybody else also experiences this. So the thought of writing down on a piece of paper my internal thoughts and intimate feelings and stuff like that, it freaks me the fuck out.
Is it an OW write-up or a SEC check, or what
right.
are you doing there?
Well, so here's what's interesting. So with an OW write-up, and I definitely think it stems from this 100%, Christy. But with the OW write-up, the idea behind it was like to like release your sins, and that will be taken away from you, like, and then you'll relieve yourself. That's what it was. It was like relieve yourself of your sins. You write it all down on a piece of paper. Well, I never felt fucking relief, because guess what? They just stapled it and put it in my folder, and they kept it. So I was like, in the back of my head, I was like, like they still have that, like when I was a kid.
It resulted in an amends project. There was punishment.
Oh, there was a conditions or punishment or whatever. Like, yeah. But like the fact is that now, you know, something that I wrote when I was 7 and 8 years old in an overts and withholds write-up is still sitting there today on file. And that does give you, like, that can hang you up in a way, like it ties you, if it's a physical tie to something that should never have been recorded and kept in a folder from a child. So so that's where, like, I know everyone's loving journaling at the moment. I can't do that, write it in a notebook, because I don't want to do that. So I'm sharing that in case, as I said, if anybody else experienced that. But what I do constantly is I write notes in my phone, and it's something that I can delete when I'm done with it. So that's something that I do, or I'll put it into other forms. So maybe I'll write it loosely in something that's easy to delete, and then I can edit it and put it into a more structured form, into something that I might publish, and that I feel okay with, because I've gone over it 10 times. I just don't want anyone haphazardly to stumble upon my journal somewhere. Anyways, that's just it is very helpful. I do the writing regularly, but I just do it in a different way. That's
two things. One, I remember thinking as a Scientology kid, people that had diaries, I was just like, ooh, that's dangerous. Like, why would you want to write all your thoughts down without, like voluntarily you're doing this? I just didn't understand it at all. And the other thing is
that's how I feel.
Scientology still has your 7-year-old OW write-ups. They still have all your crimes, and they're protected from you. Scientology thinks they have priest penitent protection over the person themselves, which is so insane to me. And also, you were a child. How dare any organization make you write these things and then call them their own? It's bizarre and insane.
100%.
Stuff that's right, like some stuff that's in there. Sorry, I'm just thinking about it now. I know we're trying to wrap up, but like some stuff that's in there is my first experiences with a boy. Like when I was at the ranch, and I was like, let's say, I think I was 13. Let's say between 12 and 13, and I had my first like physical encounters. Those were overts. I had to write them up as transgressions, and actually there was on two different occasions, 2 different guys. It was like light stuff. Anyway. Whatever, it wasn't anything like too crazy. It was just,
Miriam,
as you do.
The fact that anybody put a child to do anything like that, the fact that they literally adulticized you, over-sexualized you, didn't have any shred of common sense in the level of boundaries they kept for us. Because again, you guys, with this stupid idea that children are adults in small bodies, is what justifies the depravities inside of those hotels, and what makes everything go so under the radar. But it's like, it just, it hurts me to even hear you say that, because I mean, same thing with me. It's like our parents were helicoptering us always about second dynamic, sex, and they made such big deals. There were such puritanicals. Like, whenever there was a sex scene on watching a movie, they'd be like, okay, close your eyes, really fast forward that. We don't want to expose you to that, because that's aberrated, that's disgusting, and that's not okay. And I don't care that they did that, but it's like they had this puritanical air to themselves. We're so ethical. We couldn't be more ethical. And then on the other hand, they were like, oh yeah, lock up that kid in a room and then have him write down these things that are none of any adult's business. It's like, why are you
Yeah.
so pressed to find out sexual details of this nature out of kids? In what world is that even remotely anything? Like, why?
Right.
Or if a
Yeah, and I
child is
was
non-communicative, find out what his crimes are.
right,
Back
exactly.
to the thing
And
we read.
so like very specifically, I was 13 when they got a whole bunch of the kids got pulled down to the office to write up overts and withholds. So we wrote them up, like all us a group of kids in there writing each our own ones. And then I was put onto this thing called the ethics and correction group as a result, because I had written, so the overts were of like the touchy-feely touching between me and a boy, and then me and this other boy on different occasions. And so I was put on the ethics and correction group, which was basically a child version of the RPF. And get this, both of those boys were older than me by a few years. One was 16, one was 15. The one who was the 15-year-old, he was then placed as the in charge of the ethics and correction group. So he was running the group, and the other person never got punished. But I was there as a 13-year-old, like digging ditches and stuff, and he's like running. So it's all just wild. It's all just craziness. But again, this write-up is still sitting there somewhere in Scientology's record, a write-up that I did as a 13-year-old child of my very first intimate experiences with a boy. Yeah.
Unthinkable. Okay, let's go through some questions.
Okay.
Yeah. Did we have any more of those points, Christy, from Serge, of those?
So journaling and art therapy. Thank you, Serge. And Miriam, you guys are both artists. I'm not an artist. I don't do art therapy. I like to paint furniture, but that is all. I do not paint paintings.
That's therapeutic too. Yeah.
It's therapy. It's somehow akin to like mest work. Sorry to say the disgusting word. That means matter, energy, space, and time work, which means physical labor. And it's kind of like dumb stuff that you do when your brain needs to check out and you just do manual labor. Anyways, because painting
that can feel good sometimes.
It can. You just check out, like when I'm upset, I clean or paint furniture. No, I think the last one was empowerment through accountability was the last thing. I think that is being honest, empowering survivors and holding perpetrators responsible. So I feel like that is what we're doing. Blinders are off. Mouths are open. We're gathering a community and creating awareness and just honesty and holding people accountable and not, yes, we can be compassionate and empathetic and also hold people accountable. Those two things can happen at the same time. And I think that's what we're, trying to achieve here.
Yeah, and what Serge was saying as well is that if you don't do that, then you will further impact the victims. So if the people around just keep standing around and be like, oh, this is okay, well, it's the victims that are going to be further impacted, which is exactly the scenario in Scientology. So yeah. So that validation for the victim to say, yes, you were harmed, and no, it was not okay. And we're going to try what we can to do something about it.
Right, and that perpetrator deserves to be accountable for the thing, regardless of how long ago it was or whether they meant it or whatever the structure was. There has to be accountability there in order to have change and justice.
Yes.
And so, that's all.
Yeah.
Okay. Questions.
So thank you, Serge, so much for putting all that information together for us. Let's see if we can answer any questions.
There's I starred 26 things because I'm star happy.
Wow.
So Liz Gale, sunk cost fallacy. Serge already referenced that, but that was really interesting to me. I had never heard of betrayal blindness, I'm going to admit, and I never heard of sunk cost fallacy. I love both of those terms now. Like, I'm just going to say them forever and forever and forever. And then she
They are
said,
so accurate. Yes.
they are. How powerful to find these
Mm-hmm.
expressions with these definitions. Liz Gill, love seeing you all here. Liz Ferris, love seeing you all here. Serge Delmar, Liz Gill, Liz Ferris, love you guys more. I just love our community, so I put those up there. I know. I didn't have to,
I love
but
it.
I did. So there you go.
Yeah.
Okay, who wants to read the next one?
Can you display it so we
Can you not see
or
them?
do you want us to read it? I can't see it.
There we go.
But maybe, okay. Yeah.
Do you see it?
Yes. Sarah, do you want to go?
Healing comes in various forms. It takes a bit of a best path. As Hispanics, we were taught to suck it up, but not for me. I had to land in AA and find a solution through a 12-step journey. That's awesome.
Oh, good on you, Witch Fella. Yeah. Good on you for finding your way.
And people cope
And not
in
accepting.
a number of
Yeah.
ways. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Totally. Okay, here we go. Degraded daughters. More
Degraded daughters of, sorry.
You read.
Degraded daughters of Dianetics. Look at all these beautiful badasses here to cheer you all on. Your voices are so important, from Alicia. Thank you so much.
No, now it's your turn.
Oh, this is from Cornelius Antonius. Serge, imagine being a kid with Asperger's syndrome like me in Scientology. I don't even know. Like, that would be super challenging because when you have any kind of a disability in Scientology, it's considered a degradation. It's considered it's not disabled people, folks with any kind of a handicap. It's the same thing. There's no victims. You pulled it in. There's a reason why you have this disability, and there's this reason why you have a physical ailment, and so it's frowned upon, and you're not helped. You're held accountable for whatever that thing is, and it's super horrible. So you're shamed for something that was beyond your control, and it's kind of like their pretense that they help people when really they wouldn't help a homeless person. They would cross the road to get away from a homeless person because a homeless person is degraded. A homeless person is out exchange. A homeless person pulled in their situation. And so
I think as well, like, yeah. Sorry. I was just going to say as well, I think it depends on where you are on that spectrum too, and how that displays in you, or like what your behaviors are, or how that affects you. And so like one thing I know is that, you can be really literal with things, like just depending on where you are. So you have difficulty understanding nuances. So in Scientology, like I'm just thinking like the combination of that, having that's leaning towards that, and then Scientology is so rigid in that way as well. Like I think that could be so damaging, just that crossover of the two trying to coexist.
Like an Asperger's or something on the spectrum. Yes, absolutely, I agree. But you certainly wouldn't get any sympathy for any of these things, for sure.
No. Serge. Oh, we can't hear Serge.
Oh, I was just going to say, sorry, I had to unmute. I have to bow because I have to go. Okay. But thank you so much for having this conversation with all of us, guys. And if you guys want to just complete all the super chats and the stickers and the questions.
Yeah. Thank you.
So thank you, guys. And have
Thanks so much, Serge.
Thank you.
See you later.
We'll do it again.
Yeah. Okay. We take turns. Witch Bella. When I was 15, 1982, I was given a Dianetics paperback, but the cover kind of freaked me out. So many Mormons were being swayed to also look into it.
Look into it.
I think it's scary. And when Degraded Daughters came out with the whole volcano, Degraded Daughters of Dianetics thing, I was like, oh no, that always scared me. It was a little bit scary, especially with the, Thetans were dropped into volcanoes thing that you discover later once you leave Scientology as the evolution story.
So my mother was involved. Sorry, just on that one. Maybe, yeah. So my mother is in the marketing department at Golden Era Productions. So she actually is the one that does the art. Maybe she's not the only one, but she's definitely she does all the art for the covers of the lectures and the books. So she was telling me way back when I was still in there that everything is really like symbolic. So there's like hidden kind of it's messaging through the images. And we know that the volcano, there's references throughout, like I guess the things that L. Ron Hubbard said, and like where we ultimately came from or whatever. So like kind of the origin story. But yeah, so when you look at those like books and lectures covers, there is, it's everything's by design is what I'm trying to say. And there's
Hidden
like meanings
messages,
behind things.
symbology, things that would, in Scientology, they say restimulate. I assume that in the world they call that activate, like something that you don't even know that
this
you're
is
responding to.
100% true.
But you're
Right. So it's
responding to.
messaging. Right. That's exactly right, Christy. Thank you. That's so accurate. So it's messaging from the whole track. So things that they learned that L. Ron Hubbard said happened to us, and they've taken symbology from that and they have placed it into the design of the covers. Yes. And if for that exact purpose, so that it would activate this ruin. The thing is with Scientology is they want to get you to what your ruin is, and that's how they sell you your package. That's how they sell you the service. So if you can actually ignite that, trigger that ruin just in the imagery, subliminarily, whatever, then yes, that's what they believe that they're doing. So that they're trying to re-stimulate you on the whole track so that you're like, oh shit, I need this book. Yeah, Dianetics came from a volcano. I need to
and that's
understand.
so common in sales and marketing. Like that's something that's done to us every day, all day long that we don't know. Subliminal stuff, colors, shapes. I mean, it's really, but they have taken it to a new level because they're attaching it to your spirituality or your belief system or your whatever. It's they're not just selling you a shirt, they're selling you salvation. And I imagine that there's other cults and things that do this, but it's interesting when you see through it how much of a sales pitch Scientology is. It's just sales, reinforcement of value, sales pitch, reinforcement of value, takeaways. It's so interesting.
Sales and marketing.
It really is. It really is. But they've wrapped it up and they've gotten you to buy into that it's your spirit, it's your humanity, it's your whatever, and not just something that you're buying for your child or new tires for your car, but like your entire future and your existence. So
isn't that a great way to sell something?
It's so gross and crafty and disgusting, but and powerful, and they succeed.
Yeah. Cornelius Antonius, hello, Christy, Victoria, and Miriam. I admire you so much. I am starstruck by your courage. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Witch Ballad, Liz Gale, I heard you last night with Wholesome Aaron. I've never heard Aaron called Wholesome. I love that.
That's
and you
so
are so
funny.
delightful. I'm going to save that one, I think. You.
May the force be with you. Betrayal blindness says it all. Cognitive dissonance of being abused by those who in words say lies while the kid's intuition can't reconcile. Yes, this is so true. Can't reconcile the actions hurting them and being brainwashed literally. Yes, very true.
And the people that you're looking for to validate whether this stuff is true or not are your parents, and they're just compromised. As was every adult around us. Like there was no exception to that. Goldie, to report any cult or high controlled sect abuse in the U.S., you can file a conscience or religious freedom complaint. Oh, that's great. I did file some things with Congress, but didn't seem to matter. But I think we should keep trying. I think that's fantastic. Okay, here you go. Oh, can I answer this one? Because I was going to say, Cornelius Antonius, how does the ex-Scientology Children's Board do right now? And I would say that Jenna Miscavige just came out of kind of retirement a little bit, came back to the game, and it's my understanding that she has the intention of waking this, it's ex-Scientology Kids, ESK, that was incredibly powerful, trailblazing site where children could go and there was a forum for them to talk about what they experienced and ask questions and share stories. And I believe that it's been quiet for some time after she kind of went off and moved on to live her life. And I believe she intends to wake it back up. And then we also have Children of Scientology has a website that's active. So both of those are available. And then there's some other ESMB, that is not child related, that are active, some versions of that. So there you go. Here we go.
Amy, I want and need to help. Oh, so she sent $19.99. Thank you very much. I want and need to help. I'm on fire about this. How exactly do I help? My mind is blowing. I love you all. Serge, you are so brave and incredible. I love your spirit. Never stop speaking truth. Thank you so much, Amy. Yes, I understand that feeling. I too definitely feel that. Okay, so how do you help? This is a really good question. So I know that Mike Rinder always says, write to your congressman, write to your leaders, your officials. So I think that will always be a really good option. Because so from a bystander, what can you do? So from outside was what I mean. So that's a very good option. And just that link that Goldie shared just then, I mean, that looks interesting. So I think it's sharing the information. That's spreading the word, writing, posting, all those things go a long way. We do really appreciate your support. Thank you so much, Amy.
We can add into the description of this episode some links, and I know that Serge is regularly talking about on his community page, and we haven't really been using the community page too much, but to just jump into the comments of these local law enforcement things that they're posting stuff. They're talking about needs and issues, and that just jump into the comments and ask some questions. So sometimes you don't even have to send a letter. It doesn't have to be that formal. It can be just asking questions in lifetime with these folks that want to have conversations. They want to have dialogue about what's going on. Here's a place to do it. So we'll link to some of those things in the description. And thank you so much, Amy. We appreciate the question. Absolutely. The compliments. And the $19.99 is very thoughtful.
Thank you.
Okay, here you go.
Cornelius Antonius, sweeties, it is in the Constitution. Scientology spits in the face of the Constitution. Yes, absolutely. Yes, it does. Humble pie, justice is coming. Yes, we hope. We hope.
We do. We've been using that one lately. Amy, I have a very, very dear friend that's in prison for life without parole. He's in his 23rd year. Yikes. He has small freedoms and yet way more than what you had. That says a lot. I think
this is very true.
People find when they compare the Sea Org, certainly the Rehabilitation Project Force, or the ethics program that you were on. What was the name of it again? Ethics and Correction Program? Was the
Ethics and Correction Group, which was the Child RPF. Yes,
Child RPF at the ranch. It is so much worse than prison, than literal prison. It's really pretty crazy. Louise, I'm so impassioned with ex-Scientologist, beautiful, good character, so intelligent, compassionate. Hearing you has changed my life and meant so much to me. Thank you so much. Thank you, Louise.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
We are a work in progress, and we didn't start out where we are now. That is for sure. We have worked long and hard to be able to talk like normal people, to be able to process emotions, to be able to articulate things, and find love, compassion, and empathy, because we weren't raised with any of those things. And so it's really been interesting to feel those awkward feelings and then decide whether they were good or bad and what to do with them and whether we should use them or not. It's a little bit like being an alien and just being dumped here on Earth and trying to figure out what is this water coming from my face? Like, I don't understand it. Do you know what I mean? And can I trust this? So it's been interesting.
I think as well, we also have a little bit of an additional responsibility, because there are a lot of people who don't have this opportunity. There are some that are no longer with us. Some of our loved ones or people that we grew up with, they didn't get to be here. They didn't get to come this far. And I wish that they could have. And then there's others who are still working on how to, finding their way out of the language trap that is Scientology too. So I feel like there's as much as we've developed along the way, but there's also a responsibility to do it right, or as best as we can, and to do it with, really valuing it that we get this opportunity.
Yeah, because there's those that got out, but they're still trapped because of the belief system or because of the language. And then there's some that are like
Mm-hmm.
literally physically and mentally still trapped in, and we
Mm-hmm.
need to escape them somehow. And so back to the things that we can do is just really, please keep listening, please keep engaging with our community, please keep learning about. I know Scientology is a giant subject. It's just a giant subject, and it's amazing to me how many people are willing to learn it with us. And then there's so much nuance, and then the child stuff is just layer after layer after layer to learn to understand what the child experience was. So it's so brilliant that
Mm-hmm.
people are willing to learn this with us, and I would just say stick to it, keep hearing what we're saying, and then we can
And
all figure out.
we'll keep working on,
We
like,
will.
we're learning, we're going to be learning as we go too, and we appreciate
Oh,
everyone's patience with our
do so much.
yeah.
We do
And
so much.
this next one, Amy, thank you so much. So did the Sea Org members file taxes as minors with the cult being the guardian? Was any money put towards Social Security if it was a W-2 filing? I have so many questions. Okay, so did we file taxes? I don't think it was a requirement because we worked in a religious organization. I don't recall, unless it was done on our behalf, I don't recall ever doing, although I was a minor. Sorry, maybe that's why I don't know. I was a minor the whole time I worked at the church,
So it's a
from
mixed
13 years
answer.
old to 17 years old.
Mixed
Right.
answer.
But so I don't know. Maybe that's my answer, is that I was a minor. I was 13 to 17 years old when I worked in the C organization. And so I didn't file taxes. However, the answer to the question, so we had to have Social Security, and so our Social Security number was recorded against our weekly payments. So yes, and for a while I didn't get paid because I didn't have a Social Security number, because I didn't have a green card, because I was an illegal alien in residing in the U.S. and I wasn't supposed to be. So that's what happens when you get human trafficked. Yeah,
Sadly,
from
that's not uncommon for kids in the Sea Org that were brought
right.
here from other countries, and then they're put to work. You're working. You just don't get paid if you don't have legitimate paperwork, but you're still working. They don't go, oh,
Right.
you can't work until you have this thing. And there's a number of kids. So I was in the Sea Org prior to the tax-free status, prior to it being a church. And we were employees, and our contract said that we were employees. When we were injured, we were given care with workers' comp as employees, and we went and signed a disbursement voucher for a paycheck, which was nothing. It was $4 in cash. And I didn't have a Social Security number in the beginning, and I got it later. So I don't, and I have gotten my Social Security statement, so I can see that when I was 12 years old, I worked for Scientology of California, blah, 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 which is pretty crazy to see, and now you can see what you made the whole year, and it was like $200 for a year of work or whatever. So it's a mixed bag in that back when they were an employer, they did withholding, but not all. So I was on the RPF for a year, and there's nothing reported. I worked for the Mission of Clearwater, and I made a good bit more money when I was 14. Nothing was reported. So it seems to be a little bit all over the place. And then in whatever year it was that they got their tax-free status, you guys all became religious volunteers that collected, what? Was it a stipend? What was it that you were paid? An allowance? I don't remember what it was called.
I don't know. I still recall it as a paycheck, like that. I think I also signed off on when I received it. So I'm not sure what the official thing
They're good
was,
with their
but
paperwork, so you would have to sign a disbursement voucher. They call that a DV every time you got a service or collected any cash. Anytime money changed hands or a service that they said had value changed hands, because they were going to give you a freeloader's debt later. So they had to track the retail value of every single thing, whether it was your staff hatting, your job training, whatever it was. They tracked every penny of value that they thought things had. Anyway.
Yeah. So I think the main thing there is that, yes, there are records going back with Social Security. Absolutely. Everyone had to have a Social Security number in order to get paid. So yes.
Thank you for that question. It's a interesting,
really good question.
set of weeds to go into. And this is just a
Oh,
super sticker
Louise.
from Louise. Thank you, Louise. And she's
Yeah.
probably long gone because we took so long to get here. But thank you. We appreciate it. Okay, here we go.
Thank you.
Here's the last one.
Juliana Rodriguez. Rodriguez. I don't know if I'm saying that right. Okay, so they groom victims by compromising their psyche through doctrines and moral, ethical, holy policies, which at the same time redeems the profiteers. Yes, that is 100%.
That is good
correct.
language. I like it. Redeem the
Yes.
profiteers. Like, I've never heard it called that way before, and I think that's really a valid way to define it. Redeem the profiteers.
Yes,
Very
grooming, absolutely. Actually, there's so many words in here that are so on point, because grooming, yes. Compromising, Christy, we touched on that, yes. And absolutely it does. It affects their psyche through these doctrines, and and the moral high ground, and these structures, and yes. So everything, yes, Juliana, you just captured everything. Thank you so much for putting that so articulately.
Totally. We're done. We made it through all of them.
Thanks everyone for joining
hanging in
us.
here with us, and we appreciate it. It's so healing to me to dig into this stuff about myself, but it's so much better to dig into it with you all. And it's lovely to have questions about it and kind of be able to explain what we're processing in real time together, because these are things, some of these conversations we've never had before. Yeah, I've never had a conversation like this. So it's all growth material.
It is. It's really good. And we're very new to this live thing, and yeah, it's really cool. It's actually I guess to just be able to talk about topics as they come up, and just in a very raw and real way. I think that's really important too. So yeah, thank you everybody for sticking with us, and
hopefully together we're laying some breadcrumbs for other kids, other survivors. I think that's the most valuable thing we can do. Not just relating with each other is fantastic, and it's so community building, and I love this outside community that we're developing, but the idea that we're leaving breadcrumbs like Hansel and Gretel for other kids that need them, that we didn't have, it's really powerful. So thank you for the breadcrumbs with us.
Yeah, and if anybody has any resources for sexual assault survivors or victims of childhood abuse, if you have things that work for you, or maybe it's a particular support group, or it could be just a trauma-informed organization that has helped you. If there's anything that you'd like to link to, or to, I think that other survivors will be drawn to the topics that we discuss. And so it's always great. We all learn things along the way, and we have all garnered some things that we can share that are helpful and useful. And also that feels really good too. So if anybody does want to share anything, please feel free.
Yeah, please do. And if anyone has a channel that we can follow, anything supportive, please follow us. Please like. It helps us get this stuff out into YouTube and exposed a little more, but we would love to support you as well, and just appreciate you and your partnership here and hearing us. And it's been a really long time that we didn't have a voice, and that no one was listening, and we didn't have any justice. And so this is really remarkable to be here right now.
Yeah, and I just wanted to recommend a couple of books while we're just on that topic. The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van der Kolk. That is up there with, it's really up there. So The Body Keeps the Score, and it's a pretty chunky book, and actually there's a lot of sort of like case studies in there, but some of the case studies are they can be kind of jarring. So but I've gotten a lot out of it, even just not having to read all those things, but being able to read the bits and pieces in between, because I have my own experiences with it. That's kind of enough. I really wanted to learn something from it, and he does trickle in through there a lot of helpful tools and information. So that's a really good one. And And the other one, and I would say as well, I learned a bit about dissociation as well through reading that, and yeah, the effects of trauma and sort of the displacement of the person from their body. And that's a really interesting topic. And it's almost like if you can reverse that and get a person to come back into their body and feel the things gently, you know, in a slow and gentle way, you know, you can increase the well-being of a person. So yeah, there's a lot of good stuff in there. The other one that I would say,
can I just say that that sounds like the opposite of Scientology auditing, which is isn't that bizarre? I mean, every time we come to these crossroads and I go, we are actually literally doing the opposite of what Scientology was doing to us and our parents. We're literally having to undo all these things that were promised and delivered and sold as these life-changing, wonderful things. And now we're working all these years to undo all of that baloney.
Right. So the goal of Scientology is to make a person exterior from their body. It's to remove a person from their body. But really, and especially if you read this book, you can understand that it's really beneficial to do the opposite of that. And as trauma victims, we're often removed from our body by way of the trauma, and in the instances of trauma where we had to survive it. So a lot of good information there. He also does, there's plenty of stuff on YouTube. If you prefer to watch YouTube videos, then definitely he has a lot of interviews and stuff like that where he gives some great information. The other one I would say is Combating Mind Control by Stephen Hassan. Yeah. And that's a really good one as well. Just getting into the cult mindset, the understanding of the mind control and the mind changing and stuff like that, and the pressures that are brought to bear, and all the like some mechanisms and stuff, and also how do you identify what is a cult and what is simply a group of people. So those are good, useful resources. But please feel free, if you have read a book that you want to recommend that is really helpful, please share that with us too.
Yeah, I'll add those links as well to the description so folks can find those, but I think they're pretty readily available. Those are good ones.
Yes, and there is a book about betrayal blindness. Sorry, we should mention that too. And I actually can't, I think her name's Jennifer. Let me just do a quick Google.
I saw that one as well, and it looked really good. Just read the jacket.
I think it's called Blinded by Betrayal or something like that.
I don't know, but we can add that one too.
It's by Blinded by Betrayal.
I believe that she's the one that coined the phrase, in fact, if I read correctly.
I believe so. Oh, Blind to Betrayal. Is that what it's called? Sorry, guys, I did not prepare this part, but this is important. I think her name is... Darn it.
She was a psychologist or something that coined the phrase.
Yes.
We will find it and add it.
We'll find it and add it. So I believe it is a psychologist, and but I'm not finding it because I don't think I've put in the right thing. But anyways, yeah, so that's an important resource, and we'll add that there. Yes, and I think that's it. Thank you guys so much.
Yay. Yes, thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for hanging out until the very end with us. As Aaron would say, I forget what he says, but he's got that whole spiel down. And thank you
for staying until the very end.
Staying until the bitter end with us. Anyway, all right, you guys. Thank you. I'll see you later.
All right, see you soon.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.